They had just returned from what should have been the happiest trip of their lives, a sun-drenched honeymoon on the coast. But within 48 hours, she was gone. No texts, no calls, no trace. Her husband said she'd gone out for coffee and never came back, but his calm demeanor and shifting timeline didn't sit right with detectives. It wasn't until authorities inspected a suitcase he'd checked days later that the truth began to surface. And what they found inside didn't just answer questions. It rewrote the entire story. For friends and family, the wedding of 28-year-old Kelsey Morgan and 32-year-old Nathan Rudd felt like the kind of event you read about in magazines. Held at a vineyard just outside Asheville, North Carolina, the ceremony was intimate, classic, and overflowing with warmth. The couple had chosen early spring for the date, April 6, 2024, when the blossoms were just starting to open and the air still held a touch of mountain chill. Kelsey, a graphic designer originally from Richmond, Virginia, had been living in Charlotte for the past 3 years. Described by her peers as thoughtful, detail-oriented, and incredibly private, she rarely posted on social media but often shared hand-drawn illustrations with close friends. She loved old bookstores, herbal teas, and weekend hiking trips. Before meeting Nathan, she was focused on her career, freelancing for small publishers and children's authors. Nathan Rudd had a different kind of story. Born and raised in Knoxville, Tennessee, he worked in logistics for a supply chain company with ties across several southeastern states. He was described by co-workers as polite but distant, reliable and routine, but not particularly social. A mutual acquaintance introduced them in 2021. Their connection was quiet and quick. Within 4 months, they had moved in together. Within a year, they were engaged. From the outside, their relationship appeared calm and functional. No major drama. No rumors. Just two professionals settling into a predictable rhythm. Kelsey's friends noted that while Nathan wasn't particularly expressive, he seemed devoted. He handled most of the errands, rarely missed a family gathering, and had even started helping Kelsey's father with yard work on weekends. Photos from the wedding show a woman glowing in a satin dress with lace shoulders. Kelsey, laughing gently as she walked down the aisle with her mother. Nathan, standing in a tailored navy suit, wore a fixed smile. Not wide, not forced, just steady. The officiant later told reporters that it was one of the quietest ceremonies he'd ever done. Not awkward, but almost subdued. They looked like people who were certain, he said. Not thrilled, just sure. After the reception, which wrapped up just after 10 p.m., the couple stayed the night at a boutique in nearby before flying out the next morning for their honeymoon. Destination, Tulum, Mexico. They were gone for 7 days. Posts were minimal. One photo of a beach towel and cocktail glass. Another of Kelsey in a sun hat, smiling at the camera with barely any makeup. There were no captions, no check-ins, no long updates. Just glimpses. Friends assumed they were simply unplugging. When they returned to North Carolina on April 14th, it was a quiet re-entry. No welcome party, no brunches. Kelsey sent her best friend a simple message that night. "We're back. I'll call tomorrow." But that call never came. Nathan told those around him that Kelsey had woken up early on Monday morning, said she was going for coffee, and never returned. He said she left her phone on the kitchen counter, and that he assumed she needed some space. That explanation, at first, didn't raise alarms. Kelsey had always been independent. But as hours turned into a full day, and then 2, concerns started to set in. Her job reported that she never checked in. Her laptop hadn't been opened. Her email showed no activity since April 13th. Family tried calling, texting, even visiting the house. Nathan said he'd already filed a missing persons report, but when police checked, there was no record of it. On the surface, it had all started perfectly. A wedding in the mountains, a beach honeymoon, a peaceful return. But in hindsight, the cracks were there, subtle, quiet, and deliberately overlooked. The last known footage of Kelsey was grainy security video from the Tulum airport. She was walking slightly behind Nathan, pulling her luggage. She didn't look scared, just tired. And tired would become a recurring theme. Tired expressions, tired excuses, tired explanations. But what authorities would soon discover was that Kelsey didn't walk away from her new life. She was removed from it, silently, carefully. And when they opened Nathan's luggage a few days later, what they found didn't just contradict his story. It destroyed it. Monday morning, April 15th, 2024, began like any other. Cool. Overcast skies hung over Charlotte as the city settled into its post-weekend rhythm. But at a modest townhouse on Elmford Drive, something wasn't right. According to Nathan Rudd, His wife Kelsey had risen just after 7 a.m. She was still unpacking, he claimed, still adjusting from travel. He told police she mentioned walking down to a nearby cafe they had visited before the wedding, a quiet place on Merton Avenue. She was dressed casually. No purse, no phone, just keys. That's what he told everyone. Hours passed. Noon came and went. By 3 p.m., Nathan says he started to get nervous. He called her phone, forgetting, or pretending to forget, that it was sitting silent on the kitchen island. He sent a few texts. You okay? Let me know where you are. Getting worried. Then nothing. When Kelsey's younger sister, Mariah, tried calling that evening, Nathan picked up on the third ring. He told her Kelsey had stepped out and hadn't come home. He sounded tired, she said, not panicked, not crying, just inconvenienced. It wasn't until the next morning that things escalated. Kelsey missed a virtual meeting with one of her freelance clients at 9 a.m. She didn't cancel. She didn't reschedule. She simply didn't show. That had never happened before. By 11 a.m. Tuesday, Mariah drove down from Richmond. Kelsey's parents, both retired teachers, started making calls. Nathan told them again that he'd already contacted authorities. But when Mariah went to the local precinct herself, there was no report, no case, no record of concern. That's when Charlotte-Mecklenburg police officially opened a missing persons file. Officers visited the house and spoke with Nathan. His version of events stayed consistent. Kelsey left around 7:30, wearing sneakers, leggings, and a light hoodie. She didn't say much, he claimed, just that she wanted coffee. But there were gaps. No one at the cafe recalled seeing her that day. Nearby security cameras showed no footage of a woman matching her description walking on Merton Avenue that morning. Not at 7:30. Not at all. Detectives asked about the phone. Nathan pointed to it on the kitchen counter. It had no recent activity, no outgoing messages, no GPS history. The phone's battery had died sometime the night before, and strangely, it hadn't been plugged in since their return from the airport. A neighbor mentioned something that caught investigators' attention. She had seen Nathan carry 2 large suitcases into the garage late Sunday night, long after they arrived home. That detail seemed odd, especially since they'd supposedly already unpacked. When questioned, Nathan said he was sorting through laundry. Nothing more. Officers noted that Nathan didn't ask many questions about the investigation. He didn't offer to help search. When pressed about Kelsey's mental state, he said only she was tired from a trip. No mention of arguments. No hint of discord. Just that she needed space. But those who knew Kelsey closely sensed something wasn't right. Her best friend, Laura, told police that Kelsey had seemed withdrawn the week before the wedding. She said Kelsey confided in her once, briefly, that Nathan could be controlling with details, but never violent. She brushed it off, said everything was fine, said she just wanted to get through the honeymoon and relax. Kelsey's digital trail, however, told a different story. Her last email was sent the night before she disappeared. It was addressed to herself. No text, just an attachment, a folder labeled just in case. Investigators opened it. Inside were scanned copies of her passport, birth certificate, and health insurance card. There was also a draft of a will. By midweek, the case shifted from a standard missing persons report to something far more serious. A forensic team was brought in to examine the home. Luminol tests showed no signs of blood, no broken furniture, no physical struggle. But detectives noted a faint chemical scent in the master bedroom, a cleaning agent recently used. Still, without a body, without video, without concrete evidence, there was little to hold Nathan on. He remained in the home, calm, unshaken, and when pressed again by family and friends, his response stayed the same: I wish I knew where she went. But investigators weren't convinced she walked out at all. And by the end of that week, they would begin tracing every item from their trip, including what came back with him in Nathan's luggage, because what was inside would speak louder than any of his words ever could. As the days dragged on without any sign of Kelsey, Nathan's behavior became harder to ignore. To outsiders, he projected an image of quiet confusion, a man simply waiting for his wife to walk back through the door. But to those watching more closely, detectives, family, and even neighbors, his detachment felt less like grief and more like calculation. For starters, Nathan never joined in any of the searches. When Mariah and Kelsey's parents organized flyers and began canvassing neighborhoods, he stayed home. He told them he was letting professionals handle it, that getting in the way wouldn't help anyone. He didn't post on social media. He didn't make public pleas. Not even once. Laura, Kelsey's best friend, visited the townhouse on April 18th, hoping to speak with Nathan herself. What she found unsettled her. The house was quiet. Too quiet. No sign of Kelsey's things out in the open. No coffee mug. No sweater on the back of the couch. Her favorite blanket that always draped the armchair was gone. Her desk, normally cluttered with drawing pens and sketch pads, was wiped clean. Nathan told Laura he'd just done some tidying up. When detectives returned with follow-up questions, they found Nathan wearing the same expression he had worn all week. Flat, tired, and distant. He repeated his story without emotion. Said Kelsey left early, didn't say much, and didn't come back. But what they noticed this time was his emphasis on the clock. It was 7:26 a.m., he said. I remember because I had just turned on the TV. A strange detail to fixate on, especially since earlier he had said around 7:30. Detectives requested to see the couple's shared devices. Kelsey's phone was still on the counter, battery dead. Screen cracked slightly at the edge, but her laptop was missing. When asked about it, Nathan said he assumed she had taken it with her. But security footage from inside their building showed only Nathan returning from the airport with their luggage. Kelsey wasn't carrying anything. Another detail that raised eyebrows. Nathan had booked a locksmith appointment on April 16th, just one day after reporting Kelsey missing. He told the technician he wanted to tighten up security and have all exterior locks replaced. When the technician asked about duplicate keys, Nathan told him not to worry. There were no other residents. Family found out about the lock change later that week, and Mariah immediately reported it to police. When asked, Nathan claimed it was just a precaution, but it didn't sit right. If he truly believed Kelsey had just walked away, why would he already be preparing for her not to return? Even more troubling was Nathan's sudden withdrawal from Kelsey's side of the family. By April 19th, he had stopped answering most of their calls. He told them the pressure was too much, that he needed space to process. But police believed it was more than that. He wasn't just distancing himself emotionally, he was isolating himself logistically. A review of his credit card statements revealed a flurry of unusual activity. On April 14th, just hours after arriving home from Mexico, Nathan made a large purchase at a local hardware store. Trash bags, bleach, duct tape, gloves. He also visited a self-storage facility on the edge of town. When investigators followed up, the facility confirmed Nathan had rented a unit for the next 3 months, paying in full upfront. But the security footage showed him bringing in only one suitcase. That same suitcase had also been checked on their return flight from Mexico. TSA records confirmed that Nathan had insisted on handling the luggage himself during screening, waving off an attendant who offered to assist. It was that same bag detectives would later recover, and what they'd find inside would change the investigation forever. But even before the contents were known, suspicion was building. His actions weren't matching his words. He wasn't searching. He wasn't grieving. And when asked if he had anything else to share, he responded with the same hollow answer. I told you everything. Neighbors told police that Nathan kept the curtains drawn after Kelsey's disappearance. He rarely turned on lights at night. On 2 occasions, he was seen pacing the backyard in the dark, talking to himself. One neighbor recalled seeing him burn something in a fire pit around midnight, papers, she thought, and something that smelled sharp like plastic. While nothing could be proven yet, investigators were no longer wondering if Nathan knew more. They were certain of it. Now the question was, how long could he keep up the act before the evidence caught up to him? By April 21st, 5 days after Kelsey Rudd was reported missing, the case had shifted from hopeful search to looming suspicion. Detectives were no longer asking what happened. They were quietly preparing for what are we about to find. And all roads led to one piece of checked luggage from Flight 618, Charlotte to Cancun and back again. It was the same gray Samsonite suitcase Nathan Rudd had insisted on handling himself through TSA screening. The same bag he had wheeled behind him at Charlotte Douglas Airport with a noticeable tight grip. While most honeymooners carried souvenirs or sandy flip-flops, investigators believed this particular suitcase held something far less innocent. It started with a subpoena. Detectives requested the airline's baggage records, TSA screening logs, and surveillance footage from both the U.S. and Mexican terminals. Nothing immediately stood out. No alerts, no secondary screenings, no formal complaints. But what caught an analyst's eye was the bag's weight. On their departure to Cancun, the suitcase weighed 38 pounds. On return, 61. That was nearly 25 pounds of unaccounted for content, with no receipts for shopping, no gift store transactions, and no obvious explanation. When questioned, Nathan said he had packed a few extra books, shoes, and wet beach gear. The math didn't add up. Neither did the story. Investigators obtained a warrant to search Nathan's home, garage, and car. Hidden in the back of a rarely used closet, they found a suitcase. It was zipped, locked, and smelled faintly of bleach. What they discovered inside stunned even seasoned detectives. Inside were tightly rolled clothing items. Kelsey's. Folded beneath a beach towel were personal belongings she was thought to have taken with her. Her missing laptop, 2 pairs of underwear, her driver's license, and a small notebook filled with handwritten journal entries. But the most chilling discovery came sealed in a vacuum-packed storage bag, a set of bloodstained sheets. They matched the style and pattern of the linens from the resort hotel in Cancun. Forensic testing would later confirm the blood belonged to Kelsey. Her DNA was also found inside the suitcase itself, in trace amounts around the zipper lining, and in small hair follicles trapped in the fabric. There was also a set of used disposable gloves and a single receipt from a convenience store just 2 blocks from their hotel, dated April 13th, 11:47 p.m. The purchase, 2 rolls of duct tape and a bottle of ammonia. When confronted with the findings, Nathan didn't flinch. He said he didn't know how those items got there. He claimed the suitcase had been in storage since their return, untouched. But surveillance video from the storage unit he'd rented told a different story. Just 24 hours before the warrant was executed, Nathan had visited the unit. He rolled in the suitcase, unlocked the door, and was inside for approximately 17 minutes. When he exited, the bag was zipped again, but now the shape looked different. It sagged more. The front pocket bulged slightly. Detectives believe he had attempted to rearrange or possibly remove items, but had run out of time or courage. It was the final piece of confirmation police had been waiting for. Nathan was arrested on April 23rd, just before midnight, outside a gas station. He was alone, carrying only his phone and car keys. No sign of Kelsey. No confession. Just silence. Forensic teams went to work. They tested every item in the suitcase, every scrap of fabric, every trace of blood. The sheets alone told a horrifying story. Blood saturation patterns indicated Kelsey had likely been bleeding while lying down and not from a minor injury. The medical examiner determined the volume of blood loss suggested a fatal wound. Nathan's internet history painted the final strokes. Searches like, how long does blood last on sheets? How get rid of DNA? And can airport scanners detect body fluids? Some were searched while in Cancun. Others, just hours after they landed. The suitcase had become a silent witness, its contents testifying in ways Nathan never could. It carried not only Kelsey's belongings, but her final, fragmented traces, left behind by someone who expected her to never be found. What began as a tropical escape had ended in quiet horror. And now, finally, the truth was breaking through the surface. But even with this damning evidence, one haunting question remained. Where was Kelsey? As investigators pieced together evidence from Nathan's suitcase, their attention turned towards something less tangible, but just as telling: the marriage itself. Beneath the surface of wedding photos and honeymoon posts lay a truth far more complicated than anyone had guessed. And the deeper detectives dug, the more fractured the relationship appeared. From the outside, Nathan and Kelsey Rudd seemed like a picture-perfect couple. College-educated, well-traveled, and freshly married, their social media pages painted a blissful portrait. But friends closest to Kelsey told another story, one that had been quietly unfolding in whispers and warning signs long before she ever walked down the aisle. Detectives began by interviewing family members, starting with Kelsey's sister, Mariah. Her words were firm but heartbroken. She was in love, Mariah said, but she was also afraid to disappoint anyone, especially him. Mariah revealed that in the final month leading up to the wedding, Kelsey had confided in her about Nathan's temper. Not explosive, but cold, calculated, and punishing. Silent treatments that lasted days. Sharp comments disguised as jokes. He'd twist her words until she doubted herself, Mariah said. It was emotional manipulation. Another friend, Laura, told police about a weekend trip 3 months before the wedding. Kelsey had shown up late, distracted and nervous. When pressed, she admitted she and Nathan had fought over her wearing a low-cut dress to a work party. He called her disrespectful and threatened to cancel their honeymoon. Laura said she remembered Kelsey laughing it off, but it was the kind of laugh that doesn't reach your eyes. The more interviews detectives conducted, the more a pattern emerged. Control. Nathan liked things a certain way. His way, where they lived, who they saw, even how long Kelsey could be out without checking in. Her friends noticed she started declining girls' nights, rarely returned texts promptly, and stopped posting personal content online. It was as if she was shrinking herself to avoid setting him off. Financial records added another layer. In the months leading up to the wedding, Nathan had quietly moved Kelsey's name off their joint savings account. He told her it was a bank error, but never fixed it. He also took out a personal loan for $10,000 just 2 weeks before their wedding day. None of the funds were used for the ceremony or honeymoon. Detectives would later learn the money had been deposited into a separate account Nathan opened under a business alias. When investigators reviewed text messages between the couple, a disturbing emotional trajectory unfolded. In the beginning, they were playful, affectionate, but by the final month, the tone shifted. Kelsey's messages grew shorter, more cautious. Phrases like, "I'm sorry" and "I'll fix it" became frequent. Meanwhile, Nathan's replies alternated between cold distance and possessive demands. "Where are you? Why didn't you answer? You're lucky I put up with this." A critical turning point emerged from Kelsey's journal, recovered from inside the suitcase. The last few entries, written in her small, neat handwriting, painted a chilling picture of a woman second-guessing everything. In one entry, dated April 7th, just days before the honeymoon, she wrote, "I don't know who I married. He doesn't smile anymore. I keep waiting to feel safe again, but I don't." In the next, dated April 11th, 2 days into the honeymoon, she wrote, "He looked through my phone, accused me of lying, said I was embarrassing him at dinner. I cried in the shower just to hide it. I think I made a mistake." That was the last entry. Hotel staff from the Cancun resort were also interviewed. One cleaning attendant remembered a disturbing moment. On April 12th, while doing routine cleaning, she knocked twice before entering room 421. Nathan opened the door halfway and blocked her from coming in. He said they didn't need service. The maid noticed Kelsey sitting on the balcony, wearing sunglasses and staring out silently. She never turned around. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. All of it, the friends' warnings, the text messages, the missing money, and that final journal entry, formed a portrait no wedding photographer could ever capture. This wasn't a fairy tale gone wrong. It was a controlled environment disguised as a relationship. Kelsey may have believed love could fix it, but love doesn't erase manipulation. And in this marriage, control had been growing in the shadows long before the vows were ever exchanged. Now, with the marriage under a microscope and the evidence mounting, detectives had no doubts. Kelsey didn't just vanish. She was silenced. And the person who vowed to protect her may have been the one she needed protection from the most. By late April, Nathan Rudd's world was beginning to close in. The suitcase discovery had changed everything. His carefully crafted honeymoon narrative was unraveling, and investigators now had the kind of evidence that didn't ask questions. It demanded answers. But Nathan wasn't cooperating. He was staying silent, avoiding interviews, and declining to make any public statement about his wife's disappearance. To detectives, that silence wasn't strength. It was strategy. The task force working the case decided to make their move. But first, they needed to see how far Nathan would go to protect his version of events, or himself. Detectives began surveillance. For 3 days, they followed Nathan's movements from his home in Pineville, North Carolina, to his office, his gym, and back again. He kept to a strict, repetitive routine. No late-night drives. No suspicious stops. No sign of panic. But on the evening of April 26th, that changed. Around 7:40 p.m., Nathan pulled into a strip mall parking lot on the outskirts of Charlotte. He entered a small shipping store and emerged 20 minutes later with 2 packages in hand. Detectives later learned he'd been attempting to mail personal electronics, his laptop, and an external hard drive to a cousin in Spokane, Washington. The boxes were labeled under a fake return address. That was enough. Authorities didn't want to risk the potential destruction of digital evidence. An emergency judge signed off on a warrant for arrest based on obstruction and evidence tampering. The charges would buy time. Time investigators needed to make the full case for murder. On the morning of April 27th, at approximately 6:15 a.m., Nathan Rudd was taken into custody outside his home. He was dressed in gym clothes, earbuds in, and was walking toward his car with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Officers approached from both sides and called his name. He froze. The moment stretched thin. Then, without resistance, he dropped the bag and raised his hands. He was cuffed and placed in the back of an unmarked sedan. Inside his home, a secondary team began their search. They seized Nathan's desktop computer, multiple hard drives, handwritten notes, and, most telling, a recently purchased prepaid cell phone still in its original packaging. On his kitchen counter, a list written in block letters. Clean out locker, call cousin, delete backup files. Beneath it, scratched out in pen, rent storage unit. At the station, Nathan was read his rights. He invoked counsel. He didn't ask about Kelsey. Didn't ask why he was being arrested. Didn't say a word. But his silence couldn't hold back the wave that was coming. By the end of the day, prosecutors had added 2 more charges: obstruction of justice and improper disposal of potential evidence. Public records show the arrest affidavit described the suitcase contents in detail, along with inconsistencies in Nathan's statements, and a damning weight discrepancy in their baggage records. Meanwhile, news of Nathan's arrest spread quickly. Local media picked up the story. Friends and former co-workers of Kelsey flooded social platforms with heartbreak and outrage. The couple that once appeared as a wedding day dream had become a national headline, one marked by betrayal, secrets, and tragedy. At Kelsey's family home, the call came quietly. Detectives informed her mother and sister that Nathan was in custody, but Kelsey's body had still not been found. It was a moment of conflicted relief. Justice was finally turning, but closure remained agonizingly out of reach. For the prosecution, the next step was crucial, proving motive, opportunity, and premeditation. But even without a body, the suitcase, the journal, the blood evidence, and Nathan's suspicious behavior had painted a clear picture. Detectives believed Nathan never planned for a honeymoon. He planned for a disappearance. And as the pressure mounted, his next move would either solidify the case or unlock the last piece of the puzzle. But one thing was already certain: Nathan was no longer free. And the mask he'd worn so carefully for months, smiling groom, loving husband, heartbroken victim, had finally shattered under the weight of the truth. In the end, the arrest wasn't dramatic. There was no chase, no standoff, just a man with nowhere left to run, standing in his driveway as dawn broke, surrounded by the life he'd built on a lie, and haunted by the one he took away. When the trial of Nathan Rudd began on September 16th, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, family members, former friends. They all came to witness the final chapter of a story that had haunted the community for nearly 6 months. At the center sat a man who had once posed as the perfect husband. But now, in front of a jury of his peers, he was no longer a groom. He was the accused. The charge, second-degree murder of his wife, Kelsey Rudd. Additional charges included obstruction of justice and tampering with evidence. Though Kelsey's body had never been recovered, the prosecution believed they had more than enough to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And they were right. From day one, the prosecution came out focused, methodical, and emotionally calculated. They presented the jury with physical evidence. Kelsey's journal recovered from the suitcase, containing her final words of fear and regret. Forensic reports that showed blood traces on Nathan's luggage lining and under the handle. Flight logs revealing that Kelsey never boarded the return flight, despite Nathan claiming otherwise. And perhaps most haunting, the hotel security footage that showed Nathan leaving their resort room at 3:27 a.m. with a large black duffel bag. Kelsey was never seen again. The prosecution also laid out Nathan's digital trail: deleted messages, encrypted folders, a failed attempt to wipe his laptop just days before his arrest. All of it painted the picture of a man not grieving, but covering his tracks. Witness after witness testified to the deterioration of the marriage. Friends recalled Kelsey's growing anxiety. Her sister described her last phone call, a whispered confession that she was afraid. A co-worker described a moment when Kelsey arrived late to a meeting, flustered, with makeup streaked as though she'd been crying. Even the couple's wedding photographer testified, recalling how Nathan had grown visibly irritated during their photo shoot, snapping at Kelsey when she adjusted her dress. But the defense argued otherwise. Their position was simple. There was no body, and without one, there was no definitive proof of death. They tried to frame Kelsey as overwhelmed, possibly choosing to disappear. They brought up her anxiety and stress as signs she may have fled voluntarily. But the jury wasn't convinced, not with the suitcase, not with the blood evidence, and not with Nathan's actions. Then came the most damning moment. A surprise witness, a former co-worker of Nathan from Seattle. Under subpoena, he testified that 2 years prior, Nathan had made an offhand comment during a heated office argument, saying, "It's always the quiet ones that know how to disappear people." At the time, it was shrugged off as a dark joke. In court, it landed like a thunderclap. After 3 weeks of testimony and 42 pieces of physical evidence, the trial came to a close. On October 7th, 2024, the jury deliberated for just under 6 hours. Their verdict was unanimous: guilty on all charges. When the judge read the decision, Nathan showed no emotion, no outburst, No protest. Just the same blank stare he had worn throughout the proceedings. Kelsey's mother wept silently. Her sister gripped her hand tightly, eyes closed, as if bracing herself for a moment she knew she would never forget. 2 weeks later, at the sentencing hearing, the courtroom filled once again. This time, to witness justice delivered, the judge addressed Nathan directly, saying, "Mr. Rudd, not only did you rob the world of a kind and loving woman, but you robbed her of a future she deserved. You planned, manipulated, and tried to erase her existence. But the truth refused to stay buried." Nathan Rudd was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Following the sentencing, Kelsey's family released a statement. "While this verdict brings us justice, it cannot bring us peace. Kelsey's light will never be dimmed by the darkness that took her. We will carry her memory forward with love, always." As Nathan was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs, the world saw the final image of a man once hidden behind smiles and wedding vows, now exposed, convicted, and alone. And though Kelsey's body was never recovered, her truth had been found. Her voice, once silenced, was finally heard in full. In the months following the trial, the dust began to settle, but the echoes of what happened to Kelsey Rudd still lingered in the community, in the courtroom, and most of all, in the hearts of those who loved her. For Kelsey's family, justice brought clarity, but not comfort. Her mother, Denise Rudd, now volunteers with a local victims advocacy group, helping other families navigate the long and painful road through grief and the justice system. In an interview, she said, "I wake up every day thinking about what she must have gone through, and I go to bed every night, knowing her voice made it to the jury, through us." The suite where Kelsey and Nathan stayed during their honeymoon has since been renovated. The resort staff, shaken by the tragedy, now requires more thorough check-ins and guest surveillance. One housekeeper said, "You never forget a name like that. Every time I cleaned that hallway, I remember her smile from a photo the detective showed me." Nathan Rudd is currently serving his life sentence at Central Carolina Correctional Institution. According to prison records, he has not granted a single interview. No appeals have been filed. But beyond the courtroom and behind the prison gates lies a deeper story, one that resonates far beyond Pineville. It's about the subtle signs so often ignored, about how darkness can sometimes with a face of charm, and how even the most beautiful beginnings can hide a storm just waiting to strike. Kelsey Rudd was 29 years old. She loved sunflowers, wrote poetry in the margins of old notebooks, and once dreamed of opening her own bakery. She didn't get the chance. But her story now lives in the voices of those who speak for her, and in the lessons we're all forced to confront. This case is a reminder that true crime isn't just about the crimes. It's about the lives affected by them, the quiet victims, the overlooked warnings, and the relentless pursuit of truth that sometimes comes too late. We tell these stories not to sensationalize the horror, but to remember the humanity, and to make sure that voices like Kelsey's are never buried again. Thank you for watching this episode of the Family Crime Exposed. If you or someone you know is in a situation that feels unsafe, speak up. You are never alone, and your story deserves to be heard. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and always listen closely to the silence that speaks loudest.